Okay, for those that don't know, the calling in Kobe has been going on this past weekend. I'm doing this like live after, and let me turn the light on here. There we go. Get the light going. I'm doing this literally after this game concluded because here's the thing. There have been some really fantastic games on stream this weekend thus far, but this has to take the cake for some. This is perhaps the most amazing finish that we've seen in recent memory. It doesn't top, of course, the finish at the Pro Tour in Los Angeles, but this is definitely a spicy moment. So let's go ahead and take a look at how this game plays out. First of all, setting the stage, it's day 2. Nick Butcher at 6-2 is playing against Eugene at 6-2 as well. Nick is playing Florian, a hero that hasn't really had time to shine yet, but has been doing very well thus far in the tournament, obviously at 6-2. Rhinar Reckless Rampage is on the menu over on Eugene's side, and for those that don't know, Eugene consistently mains and pilots Rhinar regardless of Rhinar's overall position in the meta or the view that everyone has. He is loyal. Eugene is loyal to Rhinar Reckless Rampage regardless of the outcome. And sitting at 6-2 at this point in the tournament is pretty exciting overall. So as both players get ready to start the game up, we're going to watch these two go back and forth. A newer hero, one that is, only debuted really in the Rosetta set of last year, the end of last year, versus one of the oldest heroes in the game. Came out literally in the first set of Flesh and Blood in Welcome to Wraith, and yet still remains in the format for a lot of different reasons. One could argue not the strongest hero. One could argue there's a lot of hoops to jump through, but has been given tools and things to do. Look at this, starting things off by rolling scab skins. Has been given tools and things to do and more powerful effects over time, but going all the way back to Welcome to Wraith, there's a lot of history. Yep, we're gonna roll the scab skins. Let's see. Oh, it rolled off. We can't quite see what it ends up rolling. As they zoomed in, it looks like they were talking about equipment choices. Skullhorn is a really fun piece of equipment. I wonder if that's what they're talking about. I did not listen to the commentary for this, but I was enjoying listening to it for other games. Skullhorn's interesting because it does have the effect that you can pop and use, but it's also Arcane Barrier as well. And so you have Arcane Barrier in place for Florian, which could conceivably build up this mass amount of rune chance. So you're put in this interesting position, especially as a rogue deck. You're not quite sure what this Florian build is going to do. Of course, if you scouted it or if you watched anything on day one and this deck was featured, you could go back and you could say, okay, maybe this is where they're looking to play. It's more of an OTK list where they're building up rune chance or they're playing a little bit more aggressively. You might know from there, but you've got your Arcane Barrier locked in regardless. It just depends on how you actually play out and actuate the game. If they're playing more defensively, there's rolling the dice. Yep, there's a 5, there's a 2, okay. They finally settle on one of the cards to be removed, Intimidated via Rhinar's effect. And that card is removed. There's the Rootbound Carapace right off of the drop there. Going to be used to block. It does not decompose. Doesn't look like there's enough targets in the graveyard. Of course, it's early in the game, and so you do need to get online. I have found, as I've played more Verdants, and I did dabble a little bit in Blitz with Mr. Florian himself, I've found that sometimes it's just fine. It's just fine to throw a slightly underrate defense reaction that will fill your graveyard with earth cards. Does look like he is officially online and can be decomposing, and he's got a target for it. Plow under is going to be the target for decompose. That gets him 3 cards in, and Bramble Spark going to be giving it an extra boost, +3, and also the point of arcane that comes with it. That is going to make its way to the bottom of the deck on Eugene's side, and he's left with a 4-card hand. Plow Under is one of those interesting cards, along with a slew of other cards that did do the arsenal tucking, both for you and in some cases for your opponent. It's one of those interesting cards that you kind of want to play around. It reminds me a lot of assassins. And in the case that sometimes you just don't want to arsenal against an assassin, and sometimes you have to make an educated read based on what they have, because the 5-card potential of, you know, what's left in deck plus the really good card that you have left in your hand is just so good that if, you know, their density of threats that actually attack your arsenal are lower, it's worth just going for. Here the block is going to be made with the Apex Bonebreaker to give the 5 and allow you to create the effect off of Apex Bonebreaker, allow you to create that Might token. Splatter Skull, a card that did come out in the expansion slot and did absolutely nothing, which is unfortunate, but it is a nice little attack as well. Going to come on in with a Pulping. Pulping, going to discard a card. It is going to be a 6-power attack, and therefore this is going to have Dominate. But you do want to be aware that this could turn your turn off completely if that arsenaled card is indeed a defense reaction. Channel the Millennium Tree, going to be dedicated towards the block here on the side of Nick Butcher, and this is going to block for 3. I love the inclusion of Channel the Millennium Tree in a deck that throws like these little tiny, you know, points of, you know, arcane. It's just one arcane, it's one rune chant, you know, it's a Bramble Spark, one arcane, but all of a sudden that Channel the Millennium Tree, if allowed to keep around for several turns, can net you so much more value, and no one is going to be bringing in extra, you know, arcane barrier equipment into a Rune Blade who is clearly going to just focus on one point of arcane the entire game. So you get extra value with Channel the Millennium Tree. Feels quite nice, and it's something that you don't see included a lot. But then again, I guess you don't see Nick Butcher playing Florian very much on just, you know, any old Tuesday or Wednesday. Florian is not necessarily the talk of the town, and so all of it's a little bit more interesting when you don't know what you're queuing into, if you will. Enlightened Strike, there's the swap there. Enlightened Strike makes its way into the weapon slot, and Weapon makes its way into the graveyard, and then is, you know, summarily swapped. Trot Along, what an interesting inclusion. We saw it pitched earlier, but it's one of those cards that you go, oh yeah, it's just a blue. Do we care that much? Here it's giving go again to the Mandible Claw, which is just so funny because it's not a card you would ever really expect to make its way out of the draft fodder. And yet, Trot Along can be included in a variety of different decks. I saw it very early on played in multiple different warriors as just an option to give go again. In fact, in some cases, you could maybe consider it a strict upgrade to the one cost that gives go again and also gives, like Piercing 1 or whatever. And I did indeed swap that card out in Kasai for Trot Along. Continuing the turn, 3 go again is met by a block here. And Pulping is going to discard what looks like a very shiny C, or sorry, intimidate what looks like a very shiny C and C. 2 resources still up. This is going to have Dominate. If not blocked with 2 cards, it's going to have go again. Going to be met, looks like going to be met. Nope, just going to be the Trot Along. On the other side of things, maybe not. No, it is going to be the Canopy Shelter. I believe that's what that card is called. Was just released in the Terra Learn to Play deck. Canopy Shelter does create a Might token on block, which is kind of fun. Just trying to decide whether or not it's going to be Canopy Shelter or Trot Along. At this point, it's round 9, I think, in the tournament. Mandible Claw follows up. Getting such good use out of the blues in the deck and the Mandible Claw, things are really lining up well for Eugene to push that extra value. So often you see like, like a Brute, for example. Everyone knows KO at this point and how KO only, of course, has 1 arm. So you throw out the Mandible Claw, you discard one of those things at instant speed and, gain an agility or gain a Might token, and then you give it go again. But in something like Rhinar, where you're looking, yeah, it's got 3, just double checking there. In something like Rhinar, where you're looking to, maybe go wider off of the back of Mandible Claws, sometimes that's easier said than done. And Eugene here really showing the value of having enough blues in the deck and enough enablers via Go Again, and in this case Trot Along, and discards and intimidates and things like that, to be able to activate those Mandible Claws multiple turns gives you more value over the course of the game, which is quite nice. Here, a really awkward block being presented. Of course, Command and Conquer, a 7 power attack in this case because of the Might token from the Canopy Shelter from the previous turn, which was an interesting decision. You were looking at Trot Along, maybe using that blue, in blocking instead of the Canopy Shelter, or getting the extra value. Getting the extra value means that this is the line that we take from the Might token so that we can threaten more effectively the arsenal. And this most likely is going to be met by 2 pieces of equipment, and that's exactly the case. Because if it is not, then you have to give up multiple cards in 1 piece of equipment. And that is too much of an ask. Usually, you're looking to try and keep that tempo with a 4-card hand by value blocking and keeping your arsenal. Unless that arsenal just doesn't matter. And it does look like the arsenal is good enough to warrant the 2 pieces of equipment block. There's the agility token created off of the agile windup. It's going to be intimidating out a secret card. Swing Big coming across for the just casual 8. Still keeping the arsenal. Be curious to see what the arsenal is. Pitching the mighty windup, which could have been discarded, but setting up for an agility token means whatever that arsenal is, it could be like a Blood Rush Bellow, or it could be just a solid attack that doesn't have Go Again, so that you can then use the agility token on the next turn. Maybe value block and send like a 3-card hand, pitching 1, auto discarding the other, drawing a card, something to that effect, maybe having extra resources to Mandible Claw. Or if it's just a Blood Rush, going, super wide with an agility and Blood Rush. Nevertheless, Swing Big is on the menu, presenting 8 damage. Keep in mind, the block previous to this was made in such a way that allows this turn to actually formulate. Agile Windup being discarded there sets up the agility for the next turn. Swing Big presents solid damage at the 8 spot, and you needed the resource cost, or card, I should say, to pay the cost. Nick trying to decide how he wants to play out his own turn. Possibly committing. See if it shows his hand again. Yeah, it is going to be the Thistlebloom Life, I believe that is. Along with a Rune Rager Swarm, and going to try to just get the value block here. There is no discard forced, and it's good playing around. Taking this line does play further around the Face Purgatory, but it does mean that Nick should draw an extra card, and on his turn, he's going to be able to send Enlightened Strike. With Go Again, I did not quite make out what was in the arsenal on Nick's side, but he is going to have a card. 7 Go Again is the presentation. Have a card plus arsenal, and it is going to be, oh wow, that's great. Felling of the Crown. That's a good arsenal card. It furthers his Decompose. It turns on the Well-Grounded, so his boots are available to him now because they are looking for 4 Earth cards in the Banish Zone, and he does have that now. It's up to 6 overall, and this is going to force a card out of Eugene's hand. A fantastic, sort of a combo turn, if you will, because you're sending 15 damage on this turn, and you're guaranteed ripping a single card from your opponent before they even make the blocks. So that agility token that's sort of sitting on the board as value, one of my favorite mechanics from perhaps my favorite set in the game up to this point. I think it has rapidly become my favorite set in the game in heavy hitters. The agility token. Our opponent knows, if we're sitting in Eugene's seat, our opponent knows that we are set up to do multiple powerful things on our turn. And we're playing brute, so we know that we're sending 6+ power attacks. If we can send multiple of them, then we're getting way above rate on a turn cycle. So, from Nick Butcher's perspective, if he can pressure cards out of hand, then we are essentially taking away the effective use of that agility token. And the card that we spent to create it was essentially null and void. Like, for all intents and purposes, you played a 59 card deck and I forced you to draw just a Pearl, you know, a card that really didn't do anything for you. And it looks like that is going to be the case here. Swing Big is going to be the return. It does have Go Again, but you don't have resources to follow this up. Unfortunately, you don't have the ability to, I mean, if you had a blue there, maybe, and it looks like you did get rid of a blue. You could have considered some bad play where you pop Savage Sash so you can play Swing Big plus a Claw, but that just sounds so bad. It's so much easier to just keep the threat density in the deck, get rid of a not so great blue, a fine blue, not so great blue, and then just throw another Swing Big. Swing Big on one turn, Swing Big on the next turn. Not too terribly bad, right? Still asking for, 8 damage or a couple of cards to prevent some of this. No equipment blocks committed on the side of Nick Butcher outside of that face Purgatory to this point, which I personally like. I think there's an argument to be made of keeping life total parity close via the use of Grasp of the Arknight and Barkskin of the Millennium Tree, like things like that, just equipment block in general. There's arguments to be made, and I think Eugene demonstrated that, right? You're saving the arsenal to keep tempo, and there's an argument to be made to keep your life total close or at parity with your opponent so that tempo can still be vied for, because the moment that your life total drops precipitously from your opponents, they can start making the decision to just full take things and allow their 4-card hand or 5-card hand to just sort of overrun you, right? So there is always this moment of reflection of whether or not, even though it's vanilla damage in that moment, Swing Big is literally just 8 damage. It's vanilla. So the equipment there, the Barkskin play there, really doesn't have a ton of, prevention tied to it. It literally just blocked for 2. It didn't stop an arsenal disruption. It didn't stop hand disruption. It didn't, really snowball Eugene's position. It's literally just there to keep life total high. In this case, for Nick Butcher, it's life total parity. So you could say that's not even really worth the block there, especially to play out a turn like this. Like, what are you really gaining from that block? Not much of anything. At the same time, I think it's a fine block to make because you have the life lead and you're maintaining the life lead while continuing to apply pressure. So you're using the equipment there to really volley for and vie for control of the game. And you're pushing damage, continuing to push damage all the way down to 11 is Eugene. And that arsenal has been floating there for a while, and it was the Blood Rush, and I believe we're about to see the fireworks. This is the reason why I wanted to sit down and talk about this game. So they're just going to pick one. It's going to be discarded. Wild Ride discards, draw 2, Intimidate 1. It's going to be that one, is intimidated off to the side. And this is where things get a little bit interesting, because now at this point, it is 11-24. As I was saying, equipment is so important to maintaining tempo. Of course, you want to throw equipment in front of like disruptive attacks, but with this life total gap, you start to slip, especially as Rhinar, where a lot of your cards need both resources to pitch for them and a card to discard too. Like, for example, Savage Feast, right? You need a card in hand to discard too, so that you can actually play the cost of the card, pay the cost of the card, and play the card itself. And so if you get put into a position where you're forced to block 2 cards every turn, sometimes you just hit dud hands as Rhinar. And so Eugene's looking at his options here. And he has a couple. He's got a couple of attacks. And he can, of course, pressure Nick Butcher, still with 3 cards. And he takes this line. He plays Sand Sketched Plans. Now, for those that don't know, Sand Sketched Plan is, again, just like an old school WTR card that had some really crazy use cases back in the day. And it also lost you the game on the spot many times. And it very well could lose Eugene the game on the spot right here. It says, search your deck for a card, put it in your hand, discard a random card, then shuffle your deck. If the discarded card has 6 or more attack, 6 or more power, you gain 2 action points, okay? So Eugene here had cards in hand that could deal some amount of damage, but if I remember correctly, there weren't a ton of go again sources, meaning he would have to roll for Scab Skins. Now, if he rolls for scab skins and gets a 1, the turn is over and he probably loses the game on the spot. If he gets a 2 or a 3, nothing really happens. He continues playing out his turn as normal. He would have to get a 4 to get 2 action points, and then a 5 or a 6. So 50% of the time, he's getting more than 1 action point. But the other 50% of the time, his turn's probably not very good or not good enough to really pressure Nick at this point, and Nick can start to do some nutty things by making rune chants and throwing strong attacks, right? So instead, he decides to play Sand Sketch Plans, which could net him 2 action points. And it could also get him some powerful cards in hand. But keep in mind, if he grabs a card, it goes into his hand, and then he discards a random card. So it could be the card he grabbed. So what happens here? He grabs... I just want to say it. I just want to say it at this point. He goes ahead in his 4-card hand after playing Blood Rush Bellow. He spreads them out. He asks Nick to roll the die. It rolls off the table, so we don't know. And he discards not the card he grabbed, because the card he grabbed... Of course, they had to do the Intimidate trigger. The card he grabbed with 2 resources floating was none other than 2nd Blood Rush Bellow. So what are the chances here? In doing this, he gambles 25% chance that that card that is discarded off of Sand Sketch Plans is Blood Rush Bellow that he just grabbed. And in doing so, he loses the game on the spot. Very similar to rolling a 1, which was a 1 in 6 chance. So a less chance, right? It's a 12.5% chance to hit the 1. But remember, the rolling a 2 means nothing. Rolling a 3 means nothing. Your turn is just not very good. So he goes for the spike play, and he goes for the 25% chance to lose, but a 75% chance to absolutely freaking murder face Nick Butcher. And now what does he do? So he's going to discard here, and the discard is just another hit, because of course it is. And he's going to draw 2 more cards. At this point, +4 across the board is being presented. And what does he have in his hand? He had more than 1. And I think if we roll it back, I'm pretty sure the card in hand at this point is actually Eye of Ophidia. So all that math is actually wrong. Let's see if we can hand track a little bit, because I'm very curious to see if the odds are actually way scarier. Okay, he doesn't have it in hand here, so he does draw the Eye of Ophidia off of this after the shuffle with the sand sketched plan. Excuse me. He draws into the Eye of Ophidia right here. Okay, so he has a blue. After they do the Intimidate, he has a blue in the Eye of Ophidia. He has a Beast Within and a Savage Feast. And this right here is the freaking nuts, okay? Because at this point, you can claw into Savage Feast for free, into discarding the Beast Within, into drawing 2 cards. Holy freaking crap, man. Like, this is the nuttiest freaking draw. So he's gonna send for 7 the Mandible Claw. Keep in mind, all of these Intimidates on Nick's side has left him with a single card to block with and 24 life. So he's going to opt with the Eye of Ophidia, and remember, he's going to do the draw card off of the Savage Feast effect. So whatever he leaves on top, he will draw into. But this is still going to present 7 damage. Ripple Away is presented as the block. He's going to pop the Savage Sash. He's going to present Savage Feast, discard the Beast Within. Beast Within triggers, makes him lose a life, draws him a card. He's then going to draw another card off of Savage Feast to complete the effect of drawing the card. No cards to Intimidate left. Savage Feast comes across for 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Just a casual 10. Nick goes from 24 down to 20, down to 10. Drawing the card gets him another blue, which means that he can send the Mandible Claw again. and Nick can give literally everything he has. That's still coming across for 7, which goes down to 5. And then Wild Ride here goes for 10 again. No matter what, it's just full gas. This is the most crazy play from Eugene, the Reinar faithful, never giving up on his favorite hero. Congratulations to Eugene for pulling off one of the most insane finishes that we've seen certainly this weekend here at the calling in Kobe. So if you enjoyed watching that and you were hyped to see Reinar do double blood rush to finish the game after full intimidating a hand, leave a comment down below with how hyped that is, and of course make the number go to the other number. As always, everybody, thanks for watching.